All right, welcome back today for another episode of Cases and Cocktails. I'm here again with my beautiful wife, Janice Eggleston, Sandra Aguilar, and then I also have a special guest today, Robert Garza. Mr. Garza, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Greatly appreciate you coming all the way down. You're up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, right?
Correct.
Fantastic. You're here because you were actually a part of a parental alienation case,
I am.
and you're still currently in litigation, is that right?
Yes.
All right, so I don't want to talk about things that are currently going on. We're going to talk a little bit more about some other things, if that's okay. How old are your kiddos?
They're 15 and 18 now. One just
Fantastic.
turned 18 six days ago.
All right, so they're starting to age out a little bit.
Yes.
All right, that's fair. When did your case first start?
When they were 1 and 3, 2012.
2012. So you've been doing it.
Oh no, 2010, 11, somewhere around there. But
Okay.
somewhere around there.
So you've been doing it like 14 years now? 15 years?
15 years now.
That's amazing. How did it start? Was it a divorce?
It's divorce. The divorce is amicable, but
Okay.
you could see early signs of parental alienation before that. So
At that time, back in like before you got divorced, before the process started, did you know what parental alienation was?
I did not.
Okay. Was it even on your radar?
No, just know it didn't feel good.
That's fair. That's fair. I want to come back. We're going to talk a little bit about your case and some things that you went through because I think it's important because we want to talk about your case and kind of how I want other people to kind of hear how these things kind of transpire and how to work through them. But I also want to talk a lot about something that you've accomplished. In fact, you got to accomplish something that most people don't ever get to do. Most lawyers don't get to do what you did, and that's actually you got to help draft and help pass legislation here in the great state of Texas. Is that right?
Yes.
And it's legislation that is directed towards getting back time, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So when you get a protective order, restraining order, usually a false one, and it gets ruled, the allegation gets ruled out. When the judge returns the child, they return the time also. Before the legislation passed, it was a May, and usually they never did return the time. They just moved forward with it. And after it happened to me so much, and then went to final trial and never ruled on, I decided to change the law.
That's awesome. Now, no offense, I don't even know the first step of trying to engage in that. Why or how did you believe that you were going to be the person to make that change?
Because I didn't want anyone else to go through it, and I knew what I had been through and my children had been through. And not only that, it was a big tax on the system, CPS, the court system, the district attorney's offices, big waste of resources. And I thought that this could give all those resources back. People don't have to go through this. It discourages false allegations, but not real allegations.
Why do you use the term time taken back?
So they took that time from you. The court did on a precaution. And so time taken, and I wanted the time back. So time taken from me, time back to me.
As a result of the litigation, did you get time taken back?
I've never got the time back. We always asked for it, and the judge just said, let's move forward. Here's your children back. Sorry about that, but let's just move forward. We asked for it pretty much every time, and I went through about 43 plus false allegations. They were all ruled out, and she just, different judges just never looked at it like we should have the time back. Let's just move forward. And even when we went to final trial, it took 10 years to get to final trial. Our judge basically told us after about 5 or 6 times of asking, we'll just save it for final trial. So stop asking, and never even ruled on it in final trial.
Can you also though understand like a judge maybe putting something in place to be protective?
Yes. Yeah. So a protective order, restraining order. Yeah. I mean, I understand it, but they're violating your Fifth Amendment right for due process, your 14th Amendment right for care, custody, and control. So they're literally violating your constitutional rights on a precaution. They do it in the best interest of the child. It's like a wild card that I feel that they use in family court, but it actually is defined in the federal code. So
Just real fast. So I want to say a couple things. First of all, the the legislation that you passed is part of the Texas Family Code, And it provides that if you have time taken away because of a false allegation, right? And that's what you endured, like what, 43? I think you
Yes,
said?
40
43
plus.
of these false allegations. And these allegations are being sort of investigated by the Department of Family Protective Services, or CPS,
Correct.
right? It's what everyone calls it, but
Right.
it's actually DFPS. If DFPS is involved and they do the investigation, and those allegations that are lodged against you are deemed to be ruled out by the department, then the court shall, which in our little world means that the court has to, they have to give you time back, right?
Correct.
Now, it's not just random time. You get a little bit of say in that time,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. It's the same type of time and the same amount of time.
Okay.
And so if they hijack your spring break, your Christmas, Thanksgiving, then you'll get 2 in a row.
Right.
When they give the child back, you get that time back also for those holidays. So you'll get 2 in a row. If it's your first, third, and fifth weekend, then you get first, second, third, fourth, fifth weekends until that's till you
Caught
get
up.
your stuff back till it's caught up.
That's fair. I like the word too. We talked about this. I think we did you came down to San Marcos with us. I think it was last month, and we did a CLE down there for the Hayes County Family Bar section. And we talked, and I made a big point about it because I think it's important. The first time you and I met, you'd use the word precaution.
Yep.
That courts do this out of precaution. Like, you get it. Like, and I think that's kind of what Sandra was saying. Like you understand that they're doing it out of precaution, right, to protect the child. But I think in your instance, and you correct me if I'm wrong, and I know that we see it all the time, that time never gets made up. That time never really gets made up, and it's really it's got to be frustrating for you as the parent, as the litigant. Is that fair?
It is. And that's the sad part. And I see this a lot since I've been through family court for about 15 years. It's not just this instance, it's a lot of other instances that they can do the right thing. They have the discretion to do the right thing. They just don't do the right thing. Right. And that's why we have so many advocates. If the court was more fair, 50-50 on these different points or actions or whatever, and it wasn't so egregious to one litigant,
Right.
then we wouldn't have these problems.
Right. And
Why do you think there's such a bias?
It depends on the judge, the time of day, and when they take 100 days to rule on your case, they don't remember it. They go back, read through briefs that maybe a pro se litigant or whatever didn't write, and so then they make a ruling. I think that is a huge problem with today's court, is that they need to rule at least within 7 days of a hearing or a trial or anything else, because it's not fresh on their mind. And I used this before. What did y'all have last Thursday for lunch? You only have 3 meals a day. You can't remember.
Right.
If you're seeing 20 people a day, and it's very important, these people are in those cases and paying big money for you to listen to them and make the right ruling. You cannot serve justice correctly when you can't remember it.
Right. And we see it all the time. I mean, we see it all the time, and it's difficult because we're in a space with what we do as family law litigators. We have a space of, we have to help our clients sort of navigate it, right? As you're waiting for the judge to make a ruling, as the litigant, as the client, you are, hey, what did the judge say? Hey, will you email the judge? Hey, will you follow up with the judge? And Robert, you and I have had this conversation. I call it poking the bear, and I'm against it. Yep. And I typically tell clients, except for certain instances, that it's not worth doing, because what will happen oftentimes is you will get a ruling very quickly after poking the bear, and you may not like the outcome of that ruling. And so, but it's also doing the litigants a disservice who paid money and put in the time and the effort to present their case to the court. I don't think the court's doing it out of just willful neglect or unwillingness to do it. I just think that, like you said, there needs to be some parameters there to ensure that the court gets a ruling out, an order out in time.
Yep.
How many times did you have to endure that?
More than I could even
What's
count.
What's the longest you had to wait?
Over 100 days.
100
and that was for
days for a
final
ruling.
trial. That was an 8-day trial, waited over 100 days. The judge ruled on things that neither of us pleaded for or even asked for, and got it completely wrong. I got the transcript of when my daughter went back there and told the judge that she wanted, 2 weeks for mom, 2 weeks for dad, rotating in the summer. So basically 50-50. The judge got it wrong. She gave me 2 weeks in the summer, And so just horrible.
Yeah.
But my kids were in the system for 15 years. So at that point, I just got out, changed the law. That way this wouldn't happen again. And just,
Now, one of the cool things about it too is that when you were trying to pass the legislation, you had an opportunity to make it retroactive.
correct.
How many days do you think you missed out of precaution with your children?
Yeah. So when I counted it up with everything, ended up being about 2.5 to 3.5 years over the 15-year span that I missed with my children. That would have had to have been made up. But in doing so, it would stop up the court system with everyone coming back to retro their cases. And there was a ton of us. I wasn't the only one. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to clean up the court system, make it more efficient, and so this wouldn't happen to more families and children.
So you had the opportunity to get those years back,
Oh yeah,
but you opted not to for the
Correct.
benefit of others.
yes, because I think that there would have maybe been a sticking point for some legislators, and I didn't even want to chance it. And because I didn't, it passed unanimous, bipartisan, and the first time, and the governor even signed off on it when he could have vetoed it or let it go. And he signed off on it on Father's Day.
Do you just sort of feel like a rock star? Is that at this point?
No, I don't really think it sat in. I mean, it's just I think it's really something that that needed to be done.
Yeah.
And you know,
Now I gotta ask, and I want to get into your case. How are your kiddos doing now?
so my youngest is amazing.
Fantastic.
She's thriving. Everything else.
Good.
My older one. So besides parental alienation
Yeah.
and despite the court system and 15 years of litigation, we were actually doing okay. But the mom kind of sold her company for a lot of money, and so now I'm fighting not only all of that, but the money on top of it.
Yeah.
So gifts are kind of hard with
Yeah.
trips to Europe
You're
first.
still feeling the effects of some of the parental alienation.
Oh yeah. I don't think that'll ever stop.
That's
But
fair.
my kids know that I stood up for them
Mm-hmm.
and I did the best that I could, and that they don't have any doubts whatsoever.
All right, so I got to ask and get into some of these pieces. So 15 years ago, you kind of started going through the divorce process. You said earlier, I think if I recall correctly, that you kind of noticed some signs beforehand. You didn't know what you were noticing, right? You didn't notice. What were some of the things that you first noticed?
So when my child first started walking, my oldest that we had together, she was about 1 year old, started walking. We're in Switzerland. The mom was working all the time, and so we were in a hotel, and so I was kind of working from home, stay-at-home dad, or from the hotel because I'd travel along with them, and she took her first steps,
Yeah.
and so I was showing the mom, and I put her at the end of the hall,
Right.
let her go, and she fell down, and mom ran to go get her because she was crying, and she said, "No, daddy." And she turned around at that point and canceled all of my trips afterwards that were booked. And at that point, that was the pinpoint start of the alienation.
She canceled your trips with them moving forward
Oh,
because
yeah.
your daughter wanted you when she fell down.
Correct. Because at that point, I think she felt threatened that I would have a better relationship with our daughter than her. And then she canceled, like, we had trips every week for, trade shows, whatever, and got a nanny full time and just started pulling me out. And then whenever, she'd get upset, she would take the nanny, my daughter, go to like Hawaii, not tell me where they're at, and just stuff like that. And I was like, nah, I'm not doing this.
How
So,
did that make you feel?
crazy actually, because not
Right.
knowing
Yeah.
where your wife and your daughter is and your family, and just because they're upset or whatever, and it's not a good feeling. I know a bunch of fathers that that's in a marriage, but then you compound on top of that a divorce, and then on top of that false allegations. And then if you're a professional and you lose your job because of those allegations or while they're pending, a lot of people commit suicide. They don't know what to do, or hurt the children and hurt the other parent or themselves.
Yeah. Do you find that when you're trying to explain to other people what's happening, that people don't understand?
I don't think anyone can really understand what this is unless it's happened to you. You can talk about it, and I think I talked about it with Dr. Barnett and all them, that they study this but never lived it. It's a whole other thing, and I kind of describe it like if you talk to someone that knows about rape versus someone that went through it,
Right.
totally
Very
different
different,
action.
right.
And so this is something that's very devastating to not only the adult that can handle situations like that,
Right.
and if they're going through that much trauma psychologically, mentally, that it splits that kid somehow.
Yep, absolutely.
So you said a couple times, and we've talked a little bit about some of the well, we haven't talked about the allegation, but you endured 43 false allegations. I don't want you to get to a lot of specifics, but tell me, what were the type of allegations? Was it
Sure.
physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, or something completely
So
different?
all of the allegations were by proxy.
Okay.
The mother never once went and made an allegation directly to CPS or to anyone.
Okay.
And so what she did was she went to mandatory reporters, reported that it started out with starving and dehydrating the children. And she went to her therapist.
Wait a minute, stop. She said you were starving and dehydrating the children.
Correct.
How old were the
1
girls?
and 3.
1 and 3.
In therapy.
I mean, that's absurd, right? So what did you do when you first heard that allegation?
So I didn't know what the allegation was until
Right.
after
CPS
the
showed up.
restraining order, protective order, because
Oh, they went straight to the court and got a TRO? Okay.
correct. So she made it to the mandatory reporter, and then the mandatory reporter reported to CPS. They opened up a case immediately. Mom called CPS to see if there was a case open, got the case number, ran to court, got a protective order, restraining order. The court granted it because of an open CPS. 100% of the time they'll do it. And then I found out what it was about. And
Because it's out of precaution.
right. And so, of course, by precaution. And so when I found out what it was about, they pretty much closed it immediately. And here's why: is because they
Because you weren't starving and dehydrating your children like beef jerky? That's fair. I mean, that's sort of, obvious, right?
Yeah. Well, CPS called mom immediately, and they were actually at the courthouse getting that protective order, restraining order.
Okay.
And the reason I know this because we subpoenaed the stuff from CPS and from everybody, and figured out that. When CPS asked her, "Is your husband or ex-husband starving, dehydrating the kids?" she said, "No, he doesn't have enough time to do that." And still got the protective order, restraining order.
And got it,
Yeah, and the reason we knew that how she did it because we subpoenaed her therapy records, and it showed that she had made those direct statements and then refuted them to CPS.
Why do you think the game and by having someone do it by proxy instead of her calling CPS?
So I could have sued her for defamation, for slander, for all kinds of things, but because she went through mandatory reporters, she had a buffer in there. Now I could probably go back and do it, but knowing her mental history and stuff like that, it was just, it wasn't worth. I think at that point she was mentally unstable, and had the court taken the kids from her, I think there would have been some very bad repercussions to the children for that.
So that's kind of the start of it. How long did you go without seeing your kids because of that? Was that
So when they did that, we got put on supervised visits,
Right.
and I said I'll take them 8 hours Friday, Saturday,
you
Sunday.
just took them?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
But the law firm wouldn't agree to only a certain supervisor at 125 an hour, and so that ran the bill up. And I didn't know all the stuff that I know now.
Right.
And so, anyway, long story short, I went through about, 200 hours of supervision total. And before I ran out of money, and then,
What gets me about it, and just so you know, we see this over and over and over again. Sandra and I and Janice and I, we talk all the time about parental alienation cases, and they always come to us and they're a disaster, right? And what I mean by that is people have made decisions, legal decisions, litigation decisions, and they've made them in such a way that they create problems.
Yep.
And they foreclose upon opportunities to fix the problems because and I want you to tell me sort of this was sort of the calculus that you had at that time, because I can only imagine it was. I just want to see my kids.
Right.
So I'll do anything. I'll do supervised visits.
Oh, yeah.
I'll go stand on the street corner in the rain on a Thursday if I get to see my kids for 3 hours on Saturday, right? And that's what you did. And so the problem is that when that happens, undoing that from the litigation standpoint is extremely difficult.
Yep.
Is that ostensibly what you were trying to? Because I mean, at that point, I mean, as a litigator, at least I can see a space where you say, I'm not agreeing to anything. I'll go to court over whether or not I'm starving and dehydrating my children, right?
Right.
But instead, you chose to do supervised visits.
So supervised visits while the case was pending.
Pending, right.
While
That's
the
what I'm saying,
investigation
yeah.
was pending,
Yeah.
yeah. And it came to a point that later on, after so many of them, the judge finally said, okay, no contact. At that point, that was 8 years after, we were about to go into final trial, and they came up with supposedly a new allegation. It wasn't a new allegation. It was the old allegations being revisited, but the way that the law firm played it dirty, that they said it was new allegations.
Right.
That was heartbreaking
Right.
because at that point I had a great relationship with our children. Everything was going fine. And then when they pulled them away, that really, that's when the parental alienation stuck
And
after 3 months.
You said that they stopped visitation because of how many of them there were. How many of what there were?
So there was 43 plus false ones. And then there was a time where they had all been ruled out. There were no new allegations, but were pending coming up to final trial. Right. Then all of a sudden, they're like, oh, kids made an outcry. They didn't make an outcry. It was one of their hired professionals that they got from out of state to, again, mandatory reporter that supposedly saw him for an hour and made an allegation when there was no, but, I mean,
was it the same judge that you had this entire time?
Yes. Well, not the entire time. The last 4 years was the same judge. And so, there's issues with that one too. But
let me say this. You said when this started, you weren't aware of what parental alienation was.
Correct.
My first question is sort of when did you start to understand and know what parental alienation was and start looking at things and going, that's happening right there. I'm going through that right there, right? When did that happen?
I did some Google searches on this stuff, right. And one it came up. Dad Talk Today. Yeah. He was doing some stuff out in Georgia. Then I started finding other. There's probably 20 different places out there that you can look. But then Dr. Barnett stuff came up, and that was pretty helpful. But it hadn't been diagnosed. Right. It's still not diagnosed. That was 10 years ago. Yeah. That Dr. Barnett's been trying to do this. And so, but that's how I found out about it, just some Google searches. And
when did you, so you start Googling, you kind of do your own sort of education, right, for lack of a better term. When did you start to try to apply it to your legal team?
Well, I hadn't really applied it to it. In fact, in 2012 was the first time I heard parental alienation. What's the psychologist in Dallas that does parental alienation? He's a doctor. Warshak.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2012, we did a home study, and the home study person had said that she recommended my ex go see Dr. Warshak, the author of parental alienation.
Right.
So that's when I was like, parental alienation? What is that?
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
And then I saw it, and I was like, woo, I can't, yeah.
Right.
So she hit it spot on.
Yeah. Did you talk to your legal team about, hey, this is parental alienation? Did it change anything or the way that y'all addressed it?
So I'm glad you asked that because that was a hard thing to do. I could either let the parental alienation stick,
right,
or I could do something about it.
Right.
And so every time I got the kids, I chose to do something about it, take them to the zoo or somewhere where it would have their own memories rewrite the alienation that had happened.
Right.
And it wasn't worth me as a father to go down that legal route of letting it stick.
Right.
I didn't want to put them through that.
And then go to court and say, here.
Right. Here they are. They're alienated.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take the kids there that long.
Right.
So when you say let it stick, you mean allow the alienation to continue so that it can be proven in a courtroom.
Correct.
Why was it important when you did the visits with the girls to take them somewhere like a zoo?
Because I actually had time. A lot of parents don't, but I had time with them in their earlier years, and even during supervised visits, I would pay even more for the supervisor to meet at the zoo or other places to actually form memories with them rather than in a room, full of with a person or something like that. That was super important to do.
And did you find yourself that some of the places that you went to were places that you had already maybe taken them to?
Yes.
And so the neat thing about that, whether you were aware of it, that you were doing it then, is that you're reawakening their neurons, their psychological, all the things that they can recall and those good memories. So you did an amazing thing in doing that, whether you knew what you were doing or you just did it naturally.
I just did it.
Like, it's amazing that you
Yeah.
did that, because that really kept the bond and the connection between you and your children, as opposed to just sitting and doing it in a room that's really sterile and somebody's watching. If you're at the park or at a zoo, you're running around, even though somebody's watching, it's not sterile, it's more natural.
Right.
And again, all those neurons are firing, and it's, touching all of those important places in their mind and in their bodies. So that was fabulous that you did that.
Yeah.
Did you have a team of people helping you? I mean, how did you navigate? I mean, you had lawyers, right? How many lawyers you go through?
At one time, how many lawyers did I go through?
Yeah.
Probably 20
Okay.
at the very least. And at one time, I probably had 5 or 6 attorneys on a legal team because of the allegations of criminal. Then you had family law. Then you had
Well,
everything else.
going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. And then appeals and,
Yeah.
oh my
Did
gosh.
you well, did you have anybody else helping you outside the legal team? Did you have therapists? Did you have a parenting coach? Did you have anyone helping you try to help navigate not just the legal side, right, but the parental side, right? And we talk about all the time. I talk about all the time with my clients. I don't give parenting advice.
Right.
I give litigation advice. Sometimes my litigation advice is contrary to parenting advice, and it's up to the parent to make that decision. But I also tell my clients that we try to make them the best parent that they can be, so they be the best co-parent they can be, then they're the best litigant they can be, right? So it helps me as the lawyer, right, help my client navigate the litigation process. And so this sort of, it's not just, here's the Texas Family Code and this is what says you have to go do. It's how do you navigate that as a parent and as a co-parent? How do you help, your children navigate these feelings and that sort of stuff? Did you have anybody helping you at all?
I did.
Okay.
In fact, I wholeheartedly believe that had I not had so many people involved in my case, that something detrimental would have happened.
Yeah.
Because we had home studies, psych eval, therapists for the kids, parent facilitator. We ran the whole gamut.
Whole gamut, yeah.
But had all these people, she did what she did, even these people were watching.
Yeah.
That's what was the scary part.
Yeah, yeah.
And so had they not been watching, it would have been a whole lot worse. Yeah.
Bryan asked you a question, which I think is really important and something that we see often, is that how many attorneys did you go through, or how many different attorneys did you consult? And that's one of the things that we see often, is that a parent who's litigating PA or parental alienation or resist, refuse, contact cases, they're trying to find somebody that will understand what they are like. This is really happening. This is what I'm going through. And a lot of times you find attorneys or other people who don't really understand. And that parent is looking for validation about, like, look, I have been a good parent. I've been amazing. I did this, this, and this with my children. Here's the proof. Can somebody really help me, like, navigate through this and present this? Because I'm not this, I'm actually this. And so did you find that be something that you went through or had to try to navigate?
That was a huge problem. I had attorneys that had kids, had attorneys that didn't have kids, had attorneys that their lives were messes, and they promise you everything on the front end.
Right.
And when it comes to actually doing something, it falls short. And that was a real problem, and that's why there was so many in between. But there at the end, I knew what to look for already in an attorney, and that's the crazy part is that it's almost like dating somebody. You're going to be in a relationship with this
Right.
person for a while, so you better vet
Good,
them.
bad, or ugly, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't
you
matter.
better vet them.
Right.
And so you better have a good relationship with them. And I think that's the most important part is find someone that you actually can vibe with, because if not, you do have people that you butt heads with, and it's just a personality conflict. But if they don't have kids and some other stuff, it just kind of, it's different because they don't know what you've been through. But yes, that was a big issue. And so I think I'd pointed this out to y'all as, take some of that retainer, all attorneys, and the first 3 hours, or, give it to a therapist or a
Right.
coach or something.
yeah.
That way they don't throw up on you.
Yeah.
You're not a therapist, and at least they can go throw up on them.
Yeah.
Then wipe it off, come to you all clean and ready to go.
Go.
So
It's one of the biggest parts. And when we talk about what we do here, we've got a situation of, we're trying to help the client be the best version they can be, and it's not necessarily, my expertise. That's why I have Sandra, who's a licensed professional counselor, to help kind of navigate that. And then we put them in the direction of the resources that they need to get that help outside of the firm.
Yep.
Right. And and I agree with you. I think it's great to help the client process what's going on, right, and then give them the resources to get the help so we can do the legal work. Right. That's the hard part, right?
Yep.
The hard part is that, but it makes my job easier if you come to me clean. And as I said earlier, most of the parental alienation cases, the refuse, resist contact cases, they're a disaster.
right.
They make bad choices. They make these decisions, and by the time we get involved, we're number 15 on the list of 20, right? Whatever, and we're trying to fix a lot of those things that happen. I want to talk a little bit about advice to people that are going through it. I want to talk a little bit real fast about another project you have. We'll touch on that real quickly, and then lastly, I want to make sure everyone can find you to follow up with you. I know you're doing a lot of things outside, not just the legislation part, but you're also in the community helping people that are going through similar situations. So I want to do that. So most two best pieces of advice you give to someone that finds themselves, mom or dad, but on the back end of a parental alienation or a refuse and resist contact case, what would be your top two things that you'd have them do?
Whenever you do see the kids, make it, I kind of messed up on the front end because I was spending 8 hours a day. I should have broken that up to 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour in different days.
All right.
It's not the amount of time, it's the time,
Frequency.
it's the frequency of visitation. So that's number one.
Yeah, yeah.
100%. The other thing is, just be mindful of who you get as a lawyer. That person's going to be with you from start to finish. And I got to tell you, I've been to 40 something states, and this is like one of the only law firms that I know of that has someone like Sandra on the team. So,
I know of one other firm in the state of Texas that does.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that I think it's extremely important. I think it's extremely important. I want one follow-up question. If you had one good question that you could tell someone to ask a potential lawyer, what would that be?
Yeah, I got one of those. So I just thought of this. Yeah, this is a good one. So so when you go in, and they always say this, we'll ask for attorney's fees.
Right.
But I need a $10,000 retainer.
Right.
So I always ask, does the judge grant these? Yeah. The one question I would ask is, how many times have you had it returned?
Yes, that's exactly right.
I should have asked that question.
That's a very important question.
What's the percentage
Yes.
that what's your success rate
That's
with it?
exactly right. That's
What are a couple qualities that you think someone dealing with parental alienation needs to look for in an attorney?
If they understand it, just ask if they know it. Look in their eyes when you're asking, because they'll all say, yeah, whatever, but tell them to define it. Tell them
There you
to, what are the things you look for in it, and how do you fight it? And I think that you can vet them pretty quick like that.
Absolutely.
Now, you've got a new project going on. I say it's a new project, but it's just really a new round of legislation, I believe. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we did the time taken, time back bill. It's now law. Went in effect September 1st, 2023. And now the new legislation that we're going to get passed is the 3-strike law. And so right now, a lot of people are having trouble. Well, I'll just tell you my story. So I passed the law.
Right.
Now my ex can't make false allegations. So now she's interfering with my child custody.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, how do I solve this one? So now I've solved it
Right.
and proposed the law. And so legislation starts pretty soon. And so what it does is when the cop comes out, instead of saying it's a civil matter, he'll give the offending parent a $500 fine the first time, the second time, and then the third time it becomes a state jail felony, what it already is now.
Right.
And that's going to be very hard to overcome because who's going to want, well, so when I went to the DA to prosecute it or anything like that, they say, well, we don't know how many times they've done this.
Right.
Cops won't do anything about it because the DAs don't prosecute for it.
100%.
It's
it
a
happens,
law.
It happens all the time. We tell our clients, hey, when this happens, call the police. And they come out, they don't do
Civil
anything.
matter.
They say it's a civil matter, and it's sort of we don't even expect the police to do anything. We expect them to. It's a placeholder, right? So I can prove that you were denied your visitation at that moment and that time. What's funny is the order says that they can do something about it, right? So it's not like you're asking them to do anything really more than what the legislation already provides. We're just changing it, or you're trying to change it a little bit.
Right. Well, right now it's a state jail felony.
Right.
And that's why they're not doing anything about it.
Right.
Because they're like, well, I don't know if we want to do
Right.
it the first time, second time. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the excuse away from the DA.
Right.
Now it's 3 times before before they're penalized, and it's showing the track record, and it's giving the cop the only tool that they have to fight against interference with child custody.
Right.
That $500 fine. More than likely, when you say I'm calling the cops and they're coming out, they're going to hand the children over.
Right.
I never want to see someone get a ticket
Right.
or get thrown in jail or a state jail felony.
Just give the kid over.
I'm hoping the threat of the belt,
Right.
will solve it.
Yeah, that's fair. You spearheading that by yourself? You got other people with you?
Spearheading it right now with me, but I have now because of all the advocacy I've done, I have a lot of groups that will absolutely help. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And is that
20
round 2025?
Yes. Yeah. They
Fantastic.
start 2025.
Fantastic. Sandra, you had something?
Yes. Tell me what is We Are the Parents?
We're the Parents is a documentary that they just did, and I recommend it to everybody, especially if you're going through family court. And it also shows people outside of family court what you're going through at the same time. It's an amazing documentary. It's by Elizabeth and Mike McNeese, and it's on YouTube, and it's free. You can just Google We the Parents.
Nice.
In 30 seconds, what advice would you give to a parent dealing with parental alienation?
Surround yourself with family and friends, 100%.
You had that.
I do.
You had it when you were going. You and I talked about this when we first met. You had an amazing support system. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I needed more of a support system, especially going through this. So what I did was have Tuesday dinner nights. And so I'd throw a Facebook friend thing out and just say, hey, everyone's invited to my house, bring a drink, and I'll provide the food. And I always wanted to take chef classes and learn how to cook. And so I ordered Bon Appetit or something magazine, and it would come in every month. So I'd pick something new every time, and it just kept happening. And I did it like on a Tuesday, Wednesday. That way it would break up the whole week, because that was the deepest. Because people are off on weekends, you're having fun, but the bad part. Yeah. And so every week I cook something different, and I learned how. Now I can cook really, really well.
You're good at it.
I'm very good.
Well, you're gonna cook. What are you gonna cook for me next time?
I'll
Anything?
make a surprise. It
That's
doesn't matter.
the
You
deal.
just name. I want chicken, beef, whatever, and I'll
And you'll
make
do it.
something. Yeah,
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I learned to cook.
Yeah, I am really glad to hear that you did that, because, again, from a therapeutic perspective, the depression that sits in for people and the loneliness is just at a, you've had your kids and now you're divorcing or separating, and now the kids are not there and the house is quiet and their toys are there or their room is there, and the level of loneliness that can sit in. And so that was, again, another thing that you did that I think was really, really wise.
There's lots of support groups out there. Go on Google. Anti-Parental Alienation Project is amazing. There's support groups for going through this, family court, everything else. There's tons of them. So just Google it and you'll find some.
People want to connect with you as far as the legislation or just talk or
Yep.
support. By the way, I know that you have been you've gone out of your way to help other people. And so I say that I'm not just offering you to the masses, right,
yeah.
as a resource, but this is something you do. How can they get in touch with you? What's the easiest way to do it? I assume you're on all social media and all the fun
Yes.
stuff.
So Facebook's the best way to get a hold of me. You can private message me through Facebook. It's Robert Garza. Also, I'm a mediator or administrator in Dad Talk Today support group. You can come in there. They have therapists. They have lawyers that come in there, answer your questions for free, stuff like that, and help you. And then you have people that are going through this with you. So that would be the best way.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Robert, I greatly appreciate you being here, man. It's been a pleasure. I want to say thank you. So we did two CLEs this year. We did one where we had Dr. Burnett, Ashish Joshi came and spoke, and you came and spoke as you're amazing at. But more importantly, then we also went down there to Hayes County and did the one at the bar. You're an amazing speaker. People enjoy hearing you talk, and I appreciate you giving us time today to pick your brain a little bit more.
Thanks. There's also one more, Texans for Judicial Accountability.
Fantastic. Is that a website?
It is TexansForJudicialAccountability.org, I
.org.
believe. Yep. And they're doing amazing things on legislation for more accountability in the family courts and transparency.
Fantastic. An absolute pleasure. It's been amazing. I look forward to doing more work with you, by the way. It's something that I really enjoy. And I told you, as long as we're having fun, we'll keep doing it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that being said, guys, that's episode 2 for Cases and Cocktails this week. Stay tuned next week. We've got Rod McCall, episode 3. Thanks, guys.